And now, ladies and gentlemen, news of the warm, won't you?
Soft, listen to the warm. We can listen to the warm.
Well, you tell me whether it's good news or bad news. I think it's a little of both. Both. Carbon dioxide emissions have risen by even more than previously thought, according to new data analyzed by the British newspaper The Guardian, casting doubt on whether the world can avoid dangerous climate change. The data emerged as governments met in Rio at that conference. Global carbon emissions from energy are up 48% compared to 1992 when the original Earth Summit took place in Rio. You remember that? That did such good work. In 2010, the latest year for which figures have been compiled, the Energy Information Administration here in the U.S. said the world emitted 31.8 billion tons of carbon from energy consumption, a climb of 6.7% over the year before, significantly higher than the previous best estimate made by the International Energy Agency last year. Increases in fossil fuel use of this magnitude are likely to carry the world far beyond the temperature rise of 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050 that scientists have estimated is the limit of safety beyond which climate change is likely to become nasty and irreversible. According to the new EIA data, not to be confused with the IAEA, carbon dioxide emissions from the United States have resumed their rise after a brief blip caused by, the financial crap. That increase came despite the much vaunted switch from coal to shale gas with its lower emissions than coal. China, which in 2006 took over the U.S.'s historical lead as world's biggest emitter, raced to get ahead in 2010, up 15% over the previous year, and a 240% increase since 1992. China alone is responsible now for about 1/4 of global carbon emissions from energy, emitting about 48% more than the U.S. This backs up recent evidence. China may be emitting more carbon dioxide than had previously been thought. But, if they got to fill those toys with lead somehow. The ancient reserves of methane gas seeping from the melting Arctic ice cap told researchers what they already knew. As the permafrost thaws, there is a release of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas that causes climate warming. The trick was figuring out how much, said Jeff Clanton, professor of oceanography at Florida State. His team, whose findings were published in Nature Geoscience, documented a large number of gas seep sites in the Arctic where permafrost is thawing and glaciers receding. Until recently, the frozen soil and ice served to plug up or block these vents, these seep sites, but thawing conditions have allowed the conduits to open and deep geologic methane now escapes. But a team of scientists have drilled holes through an Antarctic ice shelf, the Fimbul ice shelf, Fimbul with an F, to gather the first direct measurements regarding melting of the shelf's underside. A group of elephant seals. Now you got to feel sorry for them. Are they elephants or are they seals? Do they remember or just blubber? Outfitted with sensors that measure salinity, temperature, and depth, added fundamental information to the scientists' data set, which led the researcher to conclude that parts of eastern Antarctica are melting at significantly lower rates than predicted by current models. And they're too thin anyway. It has been unclear until now how much warm, deep water rises below the ice shelf. Previous ocean models have predicted temperatures and melt rates that are too high, suggesting a significant mass loss in this region that is actually not taking place as fast as previously thought, said the lead author of the study from the Norwegian Polar Institute. So maybe not as fast warming, at least in that part of the Antarctic. But, and here we go again, at nearly 4 feet tall, the emperor penguin is Antarctica's largest seabird. If global temperatures continue to rise, however, the emperor penguin in Terre Adélie in East Antarctica may eventually disappear, according to a new study led by researchers from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, published in Global Change Biology. Over the last century, we've already observed the disappearance of the Dion Islets penguin colony close to the West Antarctic Peninsula, says lead author of the new study. The decline in those penguins, says the author, may be connected to a simultaneous decline in Antarctic sea ice due to warming temperatures in the region. Unlike other seabirds, emperors breed and raise their young almost exclusively on sea ice. They also fool around, as we learned a couple of weeks ago. If that ice breaks up and disappears early in the breeding season, massive breeding failure may occur. First analyses of the longest sediment core ever collected on land in the Arctic, published this week in Science, provide dramatic, quote, astonishing, unquote, documentation that intense warm intervals, warmer than scientists thought possible, occurred there over the past 2.8 million years. We're not the first, maybe. These extreme interglacial warm periods correspond closely with times when parts of Antarctica were ice-free and also warm, suggesting strong inter-hemispheric climate connectivity, say the project's 3 co-chief scientists. The polar regions are much more vulnerable to change than once believed, they add. And the U.S. lead scientist says, what we see is astonishing. We had no idea we'd find this. It's astonishing to see so many intervals when the Arctic was really warm, enough so forests were growing where today we see tundra and permafrost. And the intensity of warming is completely unexpected. The other astounding thing is we were able to determine that during many times when the West Antarctic ice sheet disappeared, we see a corresponding warm period following very quickly in the Arctic. So, what was happening then? Carbon capture and storage won't work, according to a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, because underground earthquakes are certain to cause the carbon to be released too soon. That's the gloomy prediction of a group of Stanford University scientists, and a blow to those who seek an engineered response to climate change. And that methane, one more time, the ancient reserves of methane gas seeping from the melting Arctic ice cap, well, that's the same story. I printed it twice, ladies and gentlemen, for your listening pleasure. News of the Warm. Copyrighted feature of this broadcast.